Yo, 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 what's up, all you burners, stoners, and potheads, and especially all you gardeners out there? This is Weedman 420 with the Weedman 420 Chronicles and my best bud in the world, Big Earl. What's up, Big Earl? How you doing, brother?
What's up, man? How are you?
I'm doing great, man. Getting off a holiday weekend and having some fun, barbecue, beer, and lots of your weed. That's for sure, my friend. I went through the gauntlet of all the new stuff you bought me, and let me tell you, that GG4, the Harpy, the Rotten Grape, the Orange and Peaches 11, the Orange and Peaches number 4. Oh my gosh, everything you bought to his house is just amazing, brother. So how was your 4th?
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that, dude. Oh, it was good, man. We have a few pups, so we just kind of do damage control. They're big babies, but it was good. We, wife and I, had a nice, quiet 4th, listening to fireworks. You know, talking to our dogs like crazy people. It's okay. It's okay. No, it's okay. It'll be okay.
Poor dogs.
They can still go potty outside.
Yeah, this ain't the fun. That ain't the fun time. That ain't the best week in the world for dogs. So when it comes to fireworks, but my brother, I'm super stoked, man. And I know you know why, because we're about to get baked. We're about to get normal, and let's do our little smoke sesh thingy. I'm smoking a strain that you gave me called Orange and Peaches number 11. Tell everybody about that.
Orange Peaches is a conversion. I wasn't even gonna name it, and it was something where I was like, man, writing these names out, there were like 6 or 7 of them. And I was so tired of writing the names out, so I just started calling them Orange Peaches. It's the Orange Soul Poos Peaches. Those were the F2s. I think those were the F2s I dropped off. I'm taking F3s right now. And so then that should be my conversion. Out of those, I should see some percent of autoflower. But trying to really stick that real citric, sour, nice flower production, of course, and then almost all the phenols I've been taking the next generation have been very citric sour. A little bit of like some lavender, especially in the colors, not so much in the flavor, but they're all really, really nice. I'm really excited for them to get to full auto.
The smell on this was amazing. Fully reminds me of the Orange Soul smell, you know, but the smell just lit me up because it was so nice. The high on this is incredible. I rolled 8 joints. Well, I don't roll, but I stuffed 8 joints for the 4th, and everybody who smoked this and who I gave a joint to was like, where did this come from?
Hey, soon you'll be able to just throw a seed in your backyard and get some weed off of it.
Oh man, I'm telling you, we got those the Ursula Berry ones outside right now, the autos outside, and they're looking beautiful. Big fat nugs growing on those ladies outside. They're looking great. It just they look like little bonsai plants. You've seen them, and I mean they're beautiful. Mrs. Weedman's very happy with them. I go out there almost every day and look at them, smell them, rub them with my fingers. Really sour, like you said, so it's like really nice and pungent. The one thing I like about this strain, I mean, I've been putting Damascus Earth on it, but I don't have to do a lot of it, which is kind of nice because I don't know if it's the smell, but the bugs are staying away.
Nice, good. I mean, so you guys have them in pots out back. A lot of times, if you just keep a lot of the foliage around it healthy, or no foliage around it, you know what I mean? Like a lot of times you can kind of keep them away. They've been pretty good this year with I did this little, when it was real cold out still, like the autoflowers are literally finishing up now, the little breeding project. But they stayed like a foot tall, and they have like one main stalk. But the bugs also haven't messed with them really. I don't know if it's that kind of year. I don't know if it's something they don't like in the plant. I don't do enough outside next to everything else, you know, to be like, well, everything's getting eaten except for these. But that's awesome to hear. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's been nice. And like I said, I've been throwing the Damascus Earth on, and I know it's rained a lot, so maybe that Damascus Earth has got a little slurry-ish on there too. So, but yeah, not really any. It's been amazing. I'm super stoked. Saw a couple bees on the male I have out there.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. I was like, oh yeah, go feed that honey, baby. Some weed honey. It was awesome. Cool, dude. Yeah, there was like 2 or 3 of them, I think, on them the other day, just like going crazy. I was like, look at them popping, man. They're eating those. They're getting fed nice, great fucking pollen.
Like good pollen.
Yeah, I was super stoked. So yeah, well done, my friend. What are you smoking on?
I rolled up the Stanky Haze first, and then I got the Drunk Rider, a plant I made a long time, cross I made a long time ago, but a buddy hunted out, and there's just a really good selection. So
How'd you
got that
make
down
that?
first.
How'd you make that drunk rider?
It
What'd you
is
cross?
Ghost Ride cross to Brandywine. Um, Honestly, the Ghost Ride I didn't know a ton about, but it was fire. It was so good. It was the only time I ever worked with tiramisu cookies. It was a tiramisu cookie cross, and so I don't know if that's where it's coming from or what, but it was so good. And the brandy wine, everything it hit was really, really nice, and just made some really good, like Pop 10 Find a Keeper packs. So I have a few left still, honestly. I don't really, throw them out there very much, but maybe I should again.
I tell you what, I'm looking forward to that because I know you just pulled it. I'm super stoked about trying that one when I see you again. And the Stanky Haze, of course. Ha ha ha. What else you got? You said you got some. What's the sangria one you have?
Blueberry sangria, yeah, that's actually the same gardener gave me
Oh,
that cut. That's from Relentless. It reminds me of the blueberry soda a lot. I would say a little
phenomenal strain, brother.
gassier.
Phenomenal strain.
Yeah,
Blueberry soda.
it's a little gassier and it grows. His selection was better than my selection as far as like plant vigor, and maybe not vigor because my blueberry soda was a monster, but it was hard to like kind of control. Where the blueberry sangria is more of a well-rounded fat flour. It doesn't just go crazy on you like the soda.
And then the other one you said you had was the lemon pound cake, right?
London pound cake. Yeah,
London pound cake.
yeah, same guy again. You know who he is. Thanks, buddy. He he got a hold of me. I haven't talked about it a lot. I have a huge seed collection, so I have people get a hold of me sometimes when they're looking for something very specific. So he was looking for this specific London pound cake off a specific pheno, even I think it was. I can't remember, but I had it from Bread by 42, and so I just threw him the pack. I was like, hey, and he threw me the winner back, and it was a win-win all around. I think probably the cakiest plant I've ever grown. And I've grown some like the ice cream cake cut, and some other cakes, and some creams. And it's probably the cakiest. Like it's pretty good plant. So and it's
Like
a nice big
cakey,
yielder.
cakey like the flavor, or cakey the way the buds grow, or what do you mean by cakey?
Almost like definitely the flavor. Like it like hits you on the back of your tongue in the same spot almost that sweetness of a vanilla cake hits you, and
Oh.
it's pretty it's good. It's hard to explain. I feel crazy sometimes when I explain weed because I'm like a fat kid explaining cake. When I'm talking about a weed. Talking about weed. I get excited about it.
I love it. I
It's
love
very
it. What
cakey.
else? What else you got going on too? I know you texted
Fuck.
me a bunch of different things. You got a few others. Tell me.
Yeah, I got that lava cake I brought down. Yes, people were geeked about that.
So good.
Sparkling wine, which is another one of my old ones that I fucking love. I
Oh,
don't know if you had that yet, but that's an
I
umami
have
bomb.
not. Is that rose all day,
That
or
is
is it more like a? Is it more like a? Is it more like a Chardonnay?
it's the sparkling wine. Maybe isn't a good example of the flavor. Its mom was rainbow sugar crossed to brandy wine.
Which you
Uh,
have done a lot with Brandywine since I've
Yeah,
known you. And some of those Brandywine plants that I've seen you grow are fucking wonderful looking.
the dad pretty much gave everything this like black purple, but so much frost, so much trikes that you can't really see it until you break it up. Like it's wild. It just looks white most of the pheno
It's
and
not a bad
expression.
thing. Not a bad thing at all.
No, not bad. It's just it was a really good dad. And I only run my dad's once, so that's it. I keep 100 or 2 seeds for myself of everything, but I like the rarity, scarcity, all that. But
I like that.
yeah, dude, yeah, I don't mind. I think everybody has their own shit, but males are just as unique and just as awesome as females. So I don't want to run the same male time and time again. I don't really even like running the same female that many times. So it just kind of works out for me at least. And sometimes I'm like, fuck, I wish I wouldn't have done that. And sometimes it's like, fuck, I wish I would have kept that. But there's always enough seeds to go around, so you can always
Yeah.
find it again.
Yeah, because if you're saving yourself 100 to 200, maybe more sometimes, depending on if you like it or not, you're gonna find probably a few in 200 seeds that are
Yeah.
close to mimicking
Yeah.
that one that you grew earlier.
No, 100%. And it's not just like that lava cake's in like two or three different crosses now. So it's not just the one male to the one female. Like if I really like a female, I'll throw it at a few males before I get rid of it. And it's like we'll fucking find it. We're gonna, we'll F2 that and take it back out if it really gets that desperate. But like
And
usually,
that's why you're a pollen chucker, my brother. That's why you're a pollen chucker.
because it's hard to keep 1,000 fucking plants, but you can keep 1,000 packs of seeds pretty easily.
And you have plenty. I've seen
Yeah,
your
exactly.
fridge.
Exactly. That's exactly right.
I love it. So this episode is kind of but on what we're talking about. Big Earl talked a little about mimicking, but we're going to talk about the transitional stage, the transition of transitioning from veg to flower, or from cloning into veg,
Yeah.
but transitioning meaning like the transitions of your grow tent, transitioning of mimicking the outdoor to your indoor. So to transitions to us are those times between the normal time frames of the growth period and of a cannabis plant. There is veg, and thank Big Earl for the notes because he's training me very well. And then there is flower, which we've talked about on prior episodes. What is veg? What is flower?
Yeah.
But what about getting from veg to flower, like that transition period that you do your 4 week of veg? Sometimes people do 6, some people may do longer. And then you transition into your flower period. And when is that? How do you get to that point? And what do you have to mimic to get to that point? But and how to finish the plant correctly. Like I'm in my finishing stage right now of yeet, and that I cut it the other day. It's now hanging and drying upside down in my tent for the next probably 10 to 15 days. I'll check on it and check on it and check on it and see how it's doing. But how to finish the plant correctly by helping it transition into the finishing stages. The like when you're polishing that shoe that just got done, and there's stages of the growth that we've talked about on prior episodes. So we want you to understand these stages, and we'd like you to see that you are where you want to be in your stage and each stage of your grow, and then slowly make the changes to where you want to be to that finished smoke.
Yeah.
And basically to see where you're at and where you want to be. Just take a look outside your window or go take a stroll, especially from like April, May, and then every month look at that weather till you get to September, October. Maybe sooner, maybe later, but this is what we're trying to get out here, the mimicking that outdoor to bring into your indoor, right?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. Is we mimic it, and maybe don't even realize that's what we're doing. Like when we look at the vegetative state, we're mimicking a spring, a really wet, not super warm, but still a little warmer, not winter cold, like, and that's different everywhere. Excuse me. So really, step number one would be and this isn't like you have to do this, but where did your plants grow up? Where did the lineage evolve? That can tell you a lot about finishing times. That can tell you a lot of stuff if the breeder can't. But if you have something that was close to the equator, long days, long summers, it's going to be able to take some more heat. It's going to want more heat. It's going to probably be a 10 to 12 week, maybe even longer on flowering compared to something that, evolved somewhere a little bit colder with shorter summers where they say, oh, well, we have to be done in 8 weeks or we're not going to, survive. Only the ones that were done in 8 weeks survived. All those 10-weekers were dying. So that plant lineage that evolved there is going to be mostly 8 weeks. We talked about the ruderalis starting in Russia. The only plants that survived there were the ones that were pretty much auto flowering because shit was so rough and rugged, and the summers were so nasty. Like the
Yeah,
summers weren't.
they basically have like 4 weeks,
Yeah,
right?
and it had to just go.
To get boom, to get the flower, to get the pollination, to drop their seeds back in the ground for the next year,
It's
right?
just
It's
natural
basic.
selection. It's the only ones
Yeah,
that can survive.
right. Only
So
the strong survive.
yeah, that's right. Yeah, right. And so when we think about like, so let's and listen, this is maybe elementary, I think, to some people, but it's also a correlation that can help bridge some of these patches, I think, especially talking about transitions. Because indoors, we just go veg to 12-12. Outdoor, it doesn't just flip to flower. It's not just one day of flower all of a sudden. Like it's a little more gradual outside. So outside more specifically than inside kind of eases you along these transitions where inside you can do some of these have some of these little tricks with food or pH that we're going to talk about coming up that can help your plant understand, hey, it's time to start doing this. Like it's time. When we get what maybe a poor example, but when we get woken up in the morning, if it was just wake up 5 seconds later, we needed to be in our car driving. Like that should be rough, and that's a much faster transition than this would be. But like there needs to be that stage of like do our natural progression. Um, so when we look at like the veg, the seedling, cloning, even though cloning is a little bit more way more humid and it isn't natural, so but we won't talk about that. But like seedling early veg, you're talking about early spring, mid spring. It's a little colder sometimes, but still the warmth is liked. Maybe even a little bit into late spring there, but um, that's veg. That's early veg. In the spring is the heavy humidities, not quite as warm as flower. Where a lot of people also get that a little wrong. They think colder and flower better. Naturally, your summer months where your flowers are growing are going to be warmer. It's not until later in flower that it gets cooler. Those last 4 weeks where it gets a little cooler. So I don't think people have many problems like they see stresses, but I see people really like, oh, I can't get it cold enough. And it's like, I run my room at 85 degrees most days. I just have my humidity match. We've talked about all that, VPD. I have my humidity match. And by 85, I mean, that's like under my light, that's not my whole room itself is like the late 70s. But anyway, so then you look at your early summer and your spring. That's like your main veg. Your late veg starts to get warmer, more sun. It can take a little bit more. You have a lot more breaking down of food, a lot more. Your biology is like all warmed up and going. Your plants uptaking way more. Your roots are shooting. That's the grow time. Um, it it then transitions like we all know the seasons. Spring to summer, early summer into summer, your main flowering into late summer, which is your later flower. Late summer. Sorry, it would be your main flower. Getting all stony and mixed up. Fall would be
that's
your later
that's
flower.
that stinky haze.
Exactly. And so you get into those real heavy feeding times, real heavy sun outside. That's your main flower. Your weeks 1 through 4 of flower, 1 through 5, maybe even 6, depending on what strains you have and how you run them and shit. Um, and again, that's outside. That's transitioned for you. You're not just going 12-12. Like outside, a lot of plants, at least for me, that I've run inside, outside, it seems like they flower a week or two longer. But I think what it is I can just tell their sex before they're really flowering hard, because I can tell their sex just with like a little microscope. I'm not an expert. I wouldn't consider myself. Some people are really good at it. I wait for them to start flowering basically to tell my sex. When I guess too early in veg, I feel like I get it wrong. But so we're talking about flower, early flower in the summer. Summer's finishing up. You're going into fall. Late flower. That's when it gets a little cooler. That's when the winds pick up, more storms again, a little bit more humid. A lot of people correlate humidity with negative in the flower room. I would take a hard look at that if that seems like it was you, uh, because humidity can be a homie. As long as you're in your VPD, you don't want too much humidity. You don't want fluctuating humidity. But I think it was Turpfine that was talking to us about that old skunk and how one of his theories, or maybe something he heard, maybe it wasn't his theories, was rooms used to be run much more humid. And so even that old skunk cut might be out there, but since we're not running our rooms as humid as they used to, we're not getting that expression out of it. So that's even that means that a high humidity or having a higher humidity than, because some people are like, I want mine 40, I want mine 50. Hey, if that's what works for you, that's what works for you. But for me, I'm in the 60s all day. I
That's why
love
your
it.
buds are so juicy.
Dude, my plants are just happier and healthier. When I had HPS, it was lower, but I run my room warmer now that I have LED, because HPS warmed my leaf temperature up, and LED wasn't getting my leaf temperature warm enough. My plants were stressing over it. That's another topic, maybe. I don't know if we've talked about that before, but you get into fall, you get to the end of your flowering stage, and October, maybe even early November, and maybe even later November for some of the warmer states. I've never grown in the warm states, so they might not even have to go off of some of that, especially with light depths. But end flower, cooler, you have less light. Huge thing, less nitrogen. We've talked about it before, and we'll probably talk about it again. Stop running nitrogen. Like when you're getting into flower weeks, when you're trying to focus heavy on flower production only, weeks 4, 5, maybe 6 if it's a late runner. Start cutting that nitrogen way out. By your last couple 2-3 weeks, that nitrogen should be like gone. It's one of the reasons I wanted to work on some of my own nutrient stuff, because I found myself having to tweak stuff to really get in my nitrogen where I liked it. Take this out, but have to add this, and that was really what it was. Take the calcium nitrate out. You have to add the calcium back in, but you want the nitrogen out because we'll talk about later. Calcium helps with transitions. But
Yeah, don't forget to add that cow mag.
exactly, CalMag every single time. Any problem? We don't even have to talk. What are we even talking about? CalMag.
Transition, throw the fucking cow mag in.
That's
Done.
it. That's it. Calcium, magnesium, done. And that's really it. And then at fall, all the leaves fall. At the end of fall, those all hit the ground. That nitrogen replenishes the ground. Next year, that shit picks up. If you are getting really dark flower, if your extract or your flower itself has a weird taste, and you're like, man, I don't know what this is. Is this my garden? Is my laundry too close to my shit? What's going on here? It's nitrogen. Like, unless you've been very good about it, if you've never thought about that and you have those problems, it's probably too much nitrogen. A lot of the lines don't. They take everything back because of that. They don't want to say, "Well, take this out and add these 3 things to it, or add this 1 thing to it." Even, and then a lot of the lines run nitrogen pretty late, at least too late for me. So that's
I usually, since I've been talking with you for a while now, and then learning and watching and learning and reading about when it comes to that stage when it basically tells you on the bottles of your nutrients that you're using too, right? Like it tells you like this, some of the stuff I've read is like, this is where you got to buy, these kind of nutrients if you're using salts or whatever, but less nitrogen. Most of the stuff has 0 nitrogen in it.
it.
That
Just
you
yeah, it
use.
depends on the bottle you get.
Right.
So the nutrient lines typically run 3 bottle or 2 bottle. A 3 bottle is usually a grow bloom micro. What a lot of I wouldn't even say gardeners don't understand, but what's not super um, well known, what they don't really show, like it's on there, but it's not. The micro there is what's holding most of your nitrogen. So you run the grow micro and veg, and then you run your micro bloom and flower. Well, if you want to take that nitrogen out, all of your micronutrients have to drop down with it. And so it's like, okay, so if I want to run this 3-part micro grow bloom, I automatically have to find another micro part that doesn't have high nitrogen to replace this with. And, I got to replace every single other thing in this bottle except for the nitrogen.
Would you recommend when you're something I kind of do here and there, and just I don't know why I do it, but when I go into flower, like for like 2 or 3 days, I give the plant a decent flush, just a nice, just straight water, just for a day or two, just to get like any of that excess out of there, because now I'm moving into the next stage. I don't know if that's something I read, maybe something that I watched, who knows. I don't even know if it's good or not. It's just, it doesn't matter. I'm going to go to that next phase of my nutrients in it. But something I just do, I throw maybe a couple within, like if I'm doing one plant, I might throw like a half a gallon in of just straight water for a day or two, and then let it sit for a couple of days, and then go into my next phase of my nutrients. I've been doing that now. This is like the third grow I've done that for. Didn't hurt the plants at all. I just don't know if it helps or if it doesn't, and then I do my final fucking flush, of course. But I'm just saying, it just, while I'm switching into a different nutrient phase, just something I've done and read. And I don't even know if it was about cannabis that I read it. So someone said, flush your plants a little bit here and there. Give them just straight water every once in a while. You don't always have to always access nutrients. Kind of give them a little clear out here and then, so you don't get buildup, 100%. So that's what I kind of do. I just kind of give it just a nice little flush before I transition into that next phase. I don't know. I don't know if it helps or not.
If you're in soil and you're, or by soil, I mean, a peat moss based medium, which is what most of the potting mixes that we use are. They're peat moss based. That one's hard to say for a bunch of times.
Yeah, hell yeah.
Peat moss based. Flushes are like vital. Cocoa, they say to run at least a 20% runoff. I would say if you're talking peat moss, or like one of those soils, you want to do, if you're watering salts every time, you definitely want to be flushing out. Ideally, you want to flush out and read your runoff and see how high it comes out. Then you can say, okay, I'm going to flush down to a normal buildup, because you're always going to have that buildup in there. And then you can start with your flower. So I can definitely see that being beneficial. It's not going to be beneficial for everyone depending on how they're running their system.
Right.
Like if you're running all organics, you don't want all that runoff. You want everything to get wet. You don't want runoff. You're pushing food out then.
Yeah, and it's not even that I'm over giving it water to runoff. I'm just giving it a good water for a couple of days, and I don't get a ton of runoff. Very little. I'm not giving it that much water to get runoff. Like a half a gallon in that pot is not going to be much runoff. I get a couple of drips. I'm just trying to freshen up the roots a little bit for that next stage. Like I said, I don't know if it's, I'm not getting, I guess what I meant by flushes, I'm not flushing it out like I would do from before I go to cut, I just give it a couple of good days of just half gallon of water, just fluid all around, make sure it's nice and in all around, let it get in there, and just give it a good little cleaning, I guess you want to call it. Clean those roots out a little bit, let them drink something fresh for a minute,
Sure. I would even try to do it with a bunch of runoff. Try to really, because that's really when you get that water running through, that's when it's going to wash out a bunch of stuff.
Right.
So I could even see. So if your way's working for you, do that. But if you ran it with some runoff, I bet that you wouldn't see anything negative happen.
Yeah, it's just some what's good about it's just some nice drips. Like just good, like kind of like just like a little flow. It's not like the flush where you're dumping a good amount of water and you're getting good runoff. I could even say sometimes the runoff is pretty clear.
Sure, that's nice. That means you don't have a big buildup, because if you have a big buildup, it definitely comes out colored.
Yeah, so it's pretty clear. When I get the runoff, which I like, I have not seen even a lot of dirt come out of that either. That means my roots are really solid and keeping that fucking whole thing nice and whole, so that's just something I do. Like I said, it's something I read maybe or heard of, and I just started doing it here, just like I said, in between the transition, of the phase, and just give it a little clean off, make it happy, and give it a little kiss and put it to bed.
Absolutely.
Let's go to flower now. Let's go. It's time to get real here.
There it goes. Yeah, it's coming. I think that's, if that works for you, I think that's great. How a buildup works, not that I think we're getting off topic a little bit, but I'm just going to go say real quick. How a buildup works is because of evaporation. You feed something and it's whatever parts per million, whatever EC food, um, and then it's the other parts are water. Well, everything water can evaporate. Salts don't. So as those, if you feed salts every single time, and it's like, let's say you're not doing it to runoff. Well, there's a certain saturation point in there where that water is stopping, and and there's wet nutrient filled water, nutrient filled medium next to dry medium, basically. That is the point where you're going to get buildup because that's going to evaporate out eventually, and then your salt's going to go right there. And then the next time you water that same way, the salts and the water have more to catch onto, and you literally end up getting this massive salt buildup, and it burns your roots, and that's what rots your roots. I mean, there's many things that do, but that's why salt buildups will rot your roots, and that's why it's so important to flush through. And that's why it's so important to feed to runoff, because you want to break that barrier of where if it had been drying in the pot and not running through, you're trying to break through that barrier and wash that shit out.
Yeah, I don't. I've learned as hearing from Alabrije, hearing from you, and hearing from other breeders. I use soil, so I'm not using cocoa where you're giving that nutrient. So I'm using soil that has nutrients in it too. So my thing is, don't overdo it. Don't over.
Yeah.
Less is more.
Sure. Yeah.
Give
absolutely.
it the nutrients that it needs, but don't do what they say recommend on the bottle.
Yeah.
is what I
That's
can
true
say.
for, I think, most bottles.
Yeah.
You know what? It is true and it's not true. If you water how they tell you to water with the 20% runoff every single time, you might be okay.
Right.
But something I really appreciate about Front Row Ag, if you look at their feeding actually goes down. You start getting into flour, you start feeding less and less and less. Most foods go up because you want more food for your flowers. Front Row Ag predicts the salt buildup. So they're saying, well, if you're getting this salt buildup, going through this, you're going to want to feed less and less and less because you're really going to have more and more and more food available that's built up in your pot. That's what I'm assuming. I guess nobody's ever told me that, but in reading that, I was like, man, that's pretty crazy. I water to runoff, so I don't really have. I do water because I check my runoff. So if it's high, I will do just a calcium water flush through on it until it's down to EC that I want. But it's everybody. A flush I think is a great tool to use for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
where did we leave off? Because we got a little sidetrack having some fun. Are we on mimic outside inside, or are we still got to talk about finishing the conditions?
Yeah, no, I think we're just going through I think what everybody already knew, but maybe trying to connect some dots on what we're trying to mimic indoors that's outdoors. So there's the stages outdoors, and nature does a really good job in most places, connecting those stages. But indoors, we have to connect them. So we've talked about the nitrogen so far, and we've talked about the atmosphere, but let's kind of get into it more so inside. So we get a little drink here. For our first stage, I think that most of us, taking a clone, we've talked about, and we've talked about talking about it again, and so we'll go past that with going from cloning to veg, or even a small seed to veg. So, like we said, outside, that's a very wet. That's this early spring. That's the early spring. That's a very wet, not super hot, but not super cold. That's what you want inside. This is the only time where, like, if you're mimicking outside specifically, this is where your nitrogen is going to be the highest, probably, maybe shortly after this. But this is one of the only transitions where you say, okay, now we're going to start hitting it with some nitrogen, because this is where you're starting to try to get the growth going. So when you go directly from cloning to veg, like in that transition, any transition, you probably want to hold nitrogen out. You want to focus more on growing roots, not growing the plant. So potassium, phosphorus, of course, nitrogen's needed all the time, but it's primarily needed when you're trying to grow green, stems, leaves, stuff like that. Of course, you're gonna have a bigger EC and a more parts per million as veg starts. That season starts, the food starts becoming more available, more broken down naturally outside. Um, and so that's when you start going from, you're in cloning, you're going to early veg, you hit it with a little bit more food. You go into your middle veg, you hit it with a little bit more food. You go into your later veg. I can see people doing it both ways. I like to drop the food a little bit late into veg, but that's just to prep it for a big PK hit that I like to give it after the first week in flower to really let it know, hey, this is time, brother. Like, it's time to start flowering. Look at all this available food. you know, um, I think one thing that I've personally seen is that there's a hardening off period when you're coming out of clones, when you're going into veg. When you're coming out of a dome where it's 100%, 99% humidity, and you're going into veg, just like when you're coming out of inside and going to outside, there's a hardening off period. You have to do that stuff gradually. And if you're indoors, if you can, raise the humidity wherever you're bringing it out from. Raise that humidity almost as high as you can. Gradually bring it down that way. Power, gradually give it more and more power if you can. Food, gradually give it more and more food if you can. Everybody's setup's different. Um, I like to do things certain ways to protect against a lot of that. So I can say, okay, why don't if when I'm in Rockwool cubes, I need about 7 days of transition, or I'm going to see a pretty good stress. But if I can do like a half hour with the top off one day, an hour the next day, double it up for 5 or 6 days, I don't usually see too much stress coming out, especially when I raise the humidity in my bedroom. But it's just really transitions are gapping one. You want to go from clone to veg, gap that gradually. That's your transition that we're talking about. And maybe that's obvious, but so you get into your veg, right? You go into your heavy veg, and you might like to raise nitrogen there. Let's say you have a small plant. Well, you want to raise nitrogen. You're saying, man, I've only got 1 week left in veg. I'm hitting this motherfucker with nitrogen. Or this plant is big. I've still got 3 weeks in veg before this other area is going to be open. I'm cutting this nitrogen down. I want this thing not to grow very much. It's really up to what your situation is.
That's interesting. Okay, that makes sense. I
Yeah,
got it.
and it's that transition isn't just about nitrogen. It's all the food going up and down, but nitrogen is the one there that's going to help you control your size of like how tall, how small, kind of thing. So then you go from veg to flower. Outside, it gets time to gradually get down to that time period for the plant to be like, oh, it's flower time. I think it's flower time today. Today it doesn't, like it takes it's over a week or two. Inside, you're just going 12-12. Some people do more than that. I've instead of doing any transition at all, really, I've seen people just say, I take it to 10 hours to light. I let it know it's time to flower. If that's works for you, that's great. That's not really a transition. It's not really a transition, but I've done it when my plants have been big and I wanted to be like, okay, I want this, I need this, just testing different stuff.
Yeah, you've told me that too. Like when that one grow I had and this shit was growing, like I saw it was going to start overgrowing the lights, and you're like, put it to 10, put it to 10. I'm like 10 hours of just light. Yeah, it'll stunt the growth a little. It'll stop it from growing. Like maybe not the buds, but it's going to stop the plant from growing taller. I'm like, yeah, too little, too late, because that fucking Majin Vegeta grew fucking everywhere. There's no control in that.
Shit. But
I fed it too much nitrogen.
it's the plant will take up what it wants, but you can kind of influence it by taking that nitrogen away, and that's really all it is. Our plant is going to do what it wants to do. That's why genetics and hunting is so important. And then we can navigate it. And that's about it. We can kind of give it a little poke and be like, hey, why don't you go in this direction a little bit? So what were we talking about? Veg to flower? Yep. Taking down the nitrogen. I like to do that at least a little bit, depending on the size of my plants again. So you get into flower, right? And we'll talk about, so first of all of these transitions, I like to pair a pH with, and we'll talk about that a little later. pH we've talked about the influence of food uptake. So you can do a lot without just adding and taking away food, changing lights times, putting lights closer to plants, stuff like that. But since we're talking about that later, we'll leave that out for now. You're going from veg into flower, that early flower. Um, in transition period, your plant does like a little bit more calcium. I forget. I tried to go back and find where I read that. I can't find it. But I do that. I add calcium, and same with potassium. At the beginning and the end of flower, I like potassium a lot. I personally see it bring expression, and I personally think it influences earlier flower sites for me. I don't know if that'll be for everybody, but I really like the increased potassium, increased calcium at the beginning of veg. So it's like the first weekend, or sorry, at the beginning of flower from veg. First week in flower, maybe even the last week of veg, bump that up a little bit, get the plant ready, get the medium ready. It's another thing I really like for veg to flower is having my light cycles similar. I wasn't a big fan of this at first. I had read somebody much smarter than me had said, well, listen, these things are on a time cycle like us. So if we went at one point, if we're getting in 6 hours of sleep and then, or 10 hours of sleep, and all of a sudden we're getting 6 hours of sleep, is how he basically explained it. He's like, would you want to get woken up earlier or would you want to go to bed later?
I like going to bed later in my older age. Now it's like I had to get up
Yeah.
early. I had to get up early today, like early. Like since COVID, COVID kind of like went back to my younger 20 years where I'd go to bed at like 1 a.m. and don't wake up till 9. Well, COVID fucked everything up for me. So it's like I used to wake up at 6:30 in the morning. I haven't. Today was the first day I woke up at 6:30 in the morning, and probably since before COVID.
How was that? Did you love it?
No, it sucked because my body still stayed up till midnight, 1 o'clock.
Yeah.
So it's like, cause that's the time I'm used to going to bed. So it's like I understand this. You go from getting your 8 hours of sleep to 6 or whatever you sleep till. It's like kind of sucks, and if your body still goes to bed at 1 o'clock in the morning, but all of a sudden you got to wake up at 6:30, that your body's like 2 hours of like that sleep you get, or 1 hour extra sleep you're actually getting, sucks. So it's kind of mimicking your plant, as we talked about mimicking earlier, your sleep schedule, right? Your time that you put that plant on schedule, right?
Yeah, well, the plants are the opposite, where they're getting a little bit more nighttime for the flower, so they're going the opposite way. But the theory is the same, where it's like some plants might like it one way or the other. Going 3 hours, each way might be better. Like, I just like to mimic mine on it. So mine is all my veg and my flower are always off at the same time, if that makes sense. Like my veg 6 hours off is always the same 6 hours as my flower room is off, which I was never a fan of because I like my veg being on when my flower's not on. It can regulate temperature in the area. It can do all kinds of stuff, not run all the power at the same time, shit like that. But after hearing that, it was like, okay, that makes sense. I don't want to just completely 180 this sleep schedule to where like this moment yesterday they were wide awake and today they're asleep. I want to say, okay, well this moment yesterday we're asleep for an hour, but it's only for a couple hours today. And I can't say I've noticed them myself being any happier, faster to transition. But I do it because it's a stress. Where I heard it, I read, I don't like to, I like to listen to everybody, but a lot of the stuff that I like to retain is from people that I trust. And then I have these things where I'm like, okay, so why did I do this? And I can't go back and fucking find who wrote it where. And so it's really hard for me sometimes to be like, hey, this is what you should do. It worked for me. Like, if that's enough proof for you. It worked for me. It worked for fucking me. It's just, that's the name of the game. Control your stressors.
Just check out his fucking Instagram and you can see all the beautiful pictures, and then show your Grow Fridays too. So, I mean, the tail's in the tape. Big Earl grows phenomenal weed.
We try, dude, and the hardest part of it is it's so many different strains constantly, and so when every strain really likes something a little bit different, and you're growing these strains that are so different, and you're trying to get them to finish at the same time, transition into flower at the exact same time, when one has wanted to go into flower for 4 weeks and the other one's still not big enough for you to comfortably put into flower. Like you got to be able to really make everybody happy, and transitioning, helping them through their transition and giving them this little boost. Like, hey, buddy, this other guy's not having a problem, but you might be. Here's a little help. It's flower time now. Yeah, it's week 2. You should start. You know, I've been showing you with the potassium boost, and then I cranked the lights down to only 10 hours a day for a couple of days, really to
And
show
I've been
you.
playing your favorite music for you now. Let's go.
Exactly. So and so you get into flower, right? You drink from veg to flower. Now, flower, you have a couple transitions too. Really, it's just from early flower into heavy flower into finishing for me, and then the wash or whatever you want to call it at the end, and the flush, and so you get into heavy flower. That's when you really want to drop the nitrogen down. For me, one reason is so that I can put more phosphorus and potassium in my water without having too high of an EC. If I kept my nitrogen taking up that space, my EC would be in the mid to high 2s. I like to run mine real low 2s. Like if it's above a 2.2, I am adding water. But that's just how my plants like it. When it gets more than that, so if it gets above a 2.2 for me, that means that there's more food in there, more money, and I have to water more because I have to flush more through. So it's like a double negative. 2.2's been my sweet spot, but it's different for everybody. That's just how I water. That's how it goes. It's different for everybody. And I do my shit weird too. So it's 1 gallon's getting watered like 4 or 5 times a day. So it's like not a lot of people grow that way. So it's going to be different for everybody a little bit there. But you go into heavy flower, drop out your nitrogen, raise your pH a little bit. We're going to get into pH here in a little bit. Maybe I just said that too early. But drop your nitrogen, add the P, the K. I like to start adding any in my runs. I run mostly salt, but I have organic inputs that I break down outside of my pot. I know my pots are toxic for any biology that's going to break down organic food. I have to break down my organics before they hit the outside. So I break those down. I start hitting my flavor additives on when I figure if I'm building flour, I want that shit to start tasting good already. Boom, hit flavor additives right when I start, week like 3, and that just increases organically. Unless I'm growing seeds, my seeds I do almost 100% organic, just to try to keep biology in there and stuff.
Science.
Yeah, try to make the healthy seeds, healthy strong seeds. But you go with the heavy flower. Now you're going into your finishing, your late flower. This is when you're trying to take out a lot of the food, but primarily you're trying to, if you drop that nitrogen down a little bit for heavy flower, continue to drop it down. You start getting into your finishing. I'm almost cutting my nitrogen completely out. I have a reserve in the plant. I know I have a buildup in my pot. I know with some nitrogen. If you aren't planning on that, don't know you have that, it might be different for you. For me though, I can bank on that up until if I got 3 weeks left. I cut my nitrogen to almost 0. The second to last week, I have 0. I'm banking only on my reserve and what's in my pot. But I water my second. I basically have 2 weeks of flush. But my second to last week, I had some potassium, some phosphorus, and some molasses and some different shit. But and then my last week is just water. I want everything out of there, But so you're going into from heavy flour to finishing that shit, making sure you get if you're watering salts, let more of that salt wash out. If maybe you water more to get more of a flush, maybe if you're watering food twice and then only flushing once, maybe water food once and flush twice the last 3 or 4 weeks. Reverse that, try to get a lot of that food out, the salts at least. I know there's an argument If you're doing organic, you don't need to flush. Power to you if you can get all that great flavor without flushing. I'll flush my shit. You know, I use a lot of organics. I use a lot of salts. It is not nice if I don't flush it. Like you can tell. So I don't know what how people don't do it. I'm assuming it's just because they're organic, like straight organic. You don't flush in the forest. Like I get it.
Spoken like a true gentleman, all you burner stoners and potheads and
Yeah,
gardeners out there.
but and that's pretty much it, dude. You go into your late flower. I drop mine almost everything out except for my PK, a fulvic acid which cleans like an enzyme which cleans. Molasses I run pretty much from week 3 all the way to the end with anything I do organic. But anything with food I pretty much drop out. Except for a little PK. The second to last week, and last week is straight water.
That's what I do. The straight week is last water, heavy the last 2 days, heavy water the last 2 days. But I'm doing nothing but water that last week. But the last 2 days, I'm really giving it a lot, flushing it to where it's draining out of those bottoms pretty good. So getting it to where it's like still pretty clear. It's pretty nice.
Yeah, everybody flushes. Everybody has their personal flush. If you're trying to work on yours, not you, but a listener, I would say try to get something where you can read your EC or parts per million. Once you can get that down and say, okay, this is how many times I need to flush, you can just mimic that as long as you're doing it the same way, and you wouldn't have to do that every time. But every time you change, you can read your runoff, and that's all I do. I water mine, and sometimes I run it an extra 2 days, 3 days. Sometimes I take it down 2 or 3 days early, depending on what the runoff is coming out as. But it goes in tap at 0.2. When it starts coming out at under 0.5, so at 0.4 or under, like it needs to be under 0.5, I'll take it. I'll take it that night. As close to dawn as I possibly can. That's when your bricks level will be the highest. Can't tell you where I read that or heard that, but I believe it, and I use it, and it works. So yeah, and then you chop it. I don't know if that's technically, I guess, not transition to the growing, but if your plants are drying before 2 weeks or 10 days, maybe you might be good. But before 10 days, if your plants are drying before 10 days, you're fucking losing out on a lot of flavor. You're adding a lot of harshness to it. If your plants are going longer than 20 days, you're going to be putting a lot of weird fucking flavors, basement flavors, wetness into it. Get a little bit of air movement over everything. Try to keep that shit like 60% humidity. I think we've talked about this already. Try to keep it as cool as you can. If you get a little bit of air movement, you can keep it between 50 and 60 on the humidity. They're going to last 10 to 14 days before they're ready.
That's where I'm at right now, baby. 71, 72 today. I can't get it down to fucking 68, 69 where I want it to be. But my humidity's been sticking, and I don't even have to put a humidifier in it. It's been great. Yeah. It's been sticking around 52 to 58 this whole time, and I cut it last. So it's on like since the 6th. It's 4 days now, and it just smells. You open up that tent a little bit, and it smells so nice. I got the fan low on a mid-high, just blowing that underneath, and then probably going just in a nice circle. And then I got the filter on too, so keeping consistent airflow through that whole entire tent. So this is going to be a nice cure, a nice dry. Yeah. I'm excited about this dry. The last one, when I dried, it was in the winter, and I couldn't fucking get that humidity right, and it dried a little bit too much. But I added a orange peel to the jars at the end, just in there. Fucking smokes great, just a little dry. But what are you gonna do about it? Doesn't mean that. Yeah, it doesn't mean the bud's bad. It's just not going to be like that. You're not going to get that nice fluffiness that you want. But it was crystally as fuck. So I mean, it still gets me baked. Yeah, but this one here,
weed. So I call it blunt weed.
Yeah, 100%.
Like a nice. I love blunts. First off, but if I have a really great flower, I want it in a joint. If I have a flower that's going to give me real high and real good effect that way, but maybe I could use some help with the flavor, or it's real dry, especially, I like them in blunts. And I don't know,
because the high is there. The flavor, like I said, the flavor you could taste it, but it's not like not pungent like which
Yeah.
way it should have been. But the high is fucking insane, and the crystal is fucking. You put in the light, it looks like little diamonds and shit. That's how
Yeah.
much crystals it had. Just
Heck yeah.
just didn't dry right, cured right, just didn't dry right. So, but you're
You do
right about
so
that.
much, dude.
I gotta try it in a blunt. So, but it was just controlling the humidity during the drying phase. The grow was great. I'm fucking bummed that but this one, oh man, I'm
It's
excited.
on.
Oh, I'm excited. Every time Mrs. Weedman came in the house, she was like, "This fucking house." During the whole grow, she's like, "This fucking house stinks." I'm like,
Hard.
she's like, "It's just like, is the gas on?" One time she's like, "Fuck, it just smells wet in here, like moist and fucking just like gassy moist." And I'm like, "I know, it's the weed. It's the
Moises
fucking
La
weed."
Lou. Dude, that's funny. Yeah, that's hey, that's what you need. That's what you want.
Oh man, I don't
That's
give fucks. I want the house to smell like weed all the time. It's great.
the best part about having those conditions perfect like that for me is that the trimming, you can let it chill there for a while. You don't have to get it after 14, 15 days. You can let it cure right there if you can keep it in those numbers and make sure your airflow's not too high. And like I've had mine on there for 4 or 5 weeks before I've like been able to get to it, because I do most of my own trimming. It's not like I have anything crazy, but I do most of my own trimming, and we know that takes some time. So if you're pulling down 10 days before vacation or some shit, like it might take you a little while to get back to that. So
It was nice only doing one plant this time. It didn't take me a long time to trim it up before I hung it. It
nice.
was nice. It was nice not doing 3 or 4 plants, getting them fucking, 2, 3, like all at once. And you're like, oh God, and I know what you go through. So, but
No,
to
man,
just do one nice plant and be done with it, I'm like, and I'm ready for the next grow. I'll probably just do maybe one again, just
those are nice
simple.
chunky too. So those will be even easy trims. I don't know if you wet trimmed it all the way, if you got some more trimming, but
I
that's
got,
the
I got,
best.
I
You
got,
got
I
no
got,
fluff.
I got a little bit left. I always take all the big leaves off. That's a given. And then and then all the little leaves that are maybe all around it. But then I leave some of the sugar leaf on,
Yeah, that's the way.
just because it kind of like still feeds it a little bit, doesn't it? It's kind of still eating that leaf for a day or two after getting some more
We,
nutrients or anything like that, or no?
personally, how mine dry, and because how I run my little dry tent, I leave any leaf that's on it at the end. I leave on it. Now, I do pretty good defoliation all the way up because I run a pretty deep canopy. But I leave all those leaves on. I like that they like hang over the flower and block the plants from each other, because sometimes they're kind of smashed in there a little bit and
Right.
branches will be touching each other. I do make sure to get in there and move them around, especially the first like 4 or 5 days. Every day I get in there and I move it just a little bit, the branches, just so I don't have flowers pressing against each other or something stupid. You never know. But we talked about it a little bit, and we should mention it real fast. I know we're getting late on this one. It's been a good conversation. pH. So you can influence certain nutrient uptakes through raising and lowering your pH. So I run cocoa. I run my pH typically in the late fives. 5.8, 5.9 is where I like to hang out. But when I get into my heavy flour, I go to the low sixes, to influence the uptake of my potassium and phosphorus. Early and late flour, I like to run it a little lower even. Maybe like a 5.7, 5.6. Early like week one, maybe like a 5.5, 5.6. Week two, like 5.7. Week three, I like take that up to like a 6.1. But what I'm doing there is I am influencing the uptake of when I drop it down specifically. So it was explained to me to do this, and it just seemed to work. And this is what I think is happening. Looking at the uptake of food, it is stopping the uptake of some other nutrients and letting potassium get uptaken a little bit heavier there at the beginning and the end of flour. And if you know a scientific reason for this, or why I'm wrong or right, get a hold of me, because this is just my conclusion on this shit from what I've been told by Gromies about certain shit. And then when you raise it, it just increases the potassium and the phosphorus uptake. Um, and that's all that's really what I use the pH for. And it might be doing something other than that. But when I started adjusting my pHs from basically like 5'6" up to 6'2" or 6'3". 5'6" being early flower, late flower, and then the 6'2", 6'3" being heavy flower, with veg being right in the middle there, like a 5'9". I started seeing I push plants along. A plant that wanted to take, be done at 8 weeks, I can push to 9, maybe 10. A plant that wanted to be done at 12, I could bring forward a little bit, and at least in expression. And it seems to have my flavor there. I can finish a tray of 6, 7 different strains and 20 different actual plants, cultivars, at the same time, even though they all kind of want to be finishing different times. So if my science is wrong there, it would not surprise me, but that works for me really well.
Maybe you discovered a new science.
It's never been explained to me, but just by looking through some charts, it's the only thing that makes a ton of sense to me. But even if I'm not right about why it does it, it fucking works. At least for me, it's nice. So
now let me ask you a quick question. So your pH, is that for soil too, or is that for cocoa? You run that style of that pH, the 5.5s to 6.2.
The water.
Water. No, but I'm saying no. I get that, but is it the pH you're running in your water to put in your? Are you doing that for
cocoa.
Strictly for cocoa? Okay, yeah. That's what I knew. I knew that. I don't know if everybody that's listening knows that. So, because soil, soil, I run between 6.2 to 6.8, depending on what and what stage, like you just said. So I start low and go high. So
bump it up like 0.3.
Right. So just so everybody knows, Big Earl grows in cocoa. So he was talking that pH from your water pH needs to be that. Soil is what I just mentioned.
Also an adjusting pH. So I run a reservoir, and a lot of people, I'm pretty lucky to be able to have an adjusting pH. But my pH is constantly trying to get to 7. I think that's any water is trying to get to neutral. At least that's my understanding of most waters, at least so my pH is constantly rising for the most part. Beginning of the mix, the first couple of days of the mix, more so than the last couple of days of the mix. I run about a 6 to 7 day mix, and so the first day I mix, I come back and I put my pH back down because it'll be up about 2.2 to 0.3 from where it was. The second day I'll come back in. But if it hasn't risen more than like 0.2 or 0.3, I won't adjust it because I like the changing pH. I want my plants. All my plants are all different cultivars. For the most part, I'll have literally 15, 16 different plants, completely different selections, sometimes maybe sisters. And I want it to adjust. Maybe one of them likes it higher there. As long as I'm not seeing stressors, if I'm seeing a stressor and I conclude that it's too high of a pH, then I've been very lazy. Because that will not be my first conclusion. Because it would have to be a really high pH for me to come back and be like, oh man, there was a fallout in my reservoir. My pH skyrocketed. I could see something floating around or something for something like that to happen. Usually.
Gotcha. That's a good trick. I like that one.
pH that shit.
pH that shit. So, Big Earl, my brother, that was another phenomenal show.
It was a good one, man. Sometimes I feel like I'm rambling on, but I hope we learned some shit about some of the transitions inside, how to help it along, how to give it a little boost, like we were saying.
The first person that reaches out to Big Earl and I and says how many times we use the word mimic between the two of us, I'll send you some stickers or something.
I'll send you a pack of seeds.
Yeah, I'll send you a pack of seeds and some stickers. Just to
that's just all we're doing.
We said mimic a lot.
Mimic the sun, mimic the weather, mimic the fucking biology,
Yeah. We're gonna talk. I think we're gonna talk next. We'll do an episode about soil, like how to do your own soil, because I've seen you do it. How do you mix your own soil? We haven't done something on that, so we'll talk about that too. It'll be a lot of fun. Yeah, composting and all that fun stuff. So maybe we'll have somebody on about composting and soil too, like how to mix and to what you want to grow and for flavor, taste, whatever. It's got to be somebody out there that knows some shit. So, Big Earl, my brother, man, another great show, brother. I missed you taking a week off. It
Yeah.
sucked. So,
I felt like we were doing something wrong. I was like, man,
yeah.
I feel like I should have done. I had something not on my calendar. I should have had something. I don't know.
It was Sunday night, last Sunday, and we always do our podcast meet up and talk about the show for when we record on Monday. And it was last Sunday, and all of a sudden I'm like, oh, we don't have podcast practice tonight. This sucks. And Mrs. Weedman said the same thing. She goes, don't you guys usually have podcast practice? I'm like, yeah, but not this Sunday. We just didn't do it because we don't have a show this week because we're just taking off. And she's like, "Oh, you don't see your best friend, Big Earl." I'm like, "Shut up, man! That's my Sunday night special right there. I can fucking get baked. We have a good time. We fucking talk."
That's true. It's nice. It's always so nice to talk. Just talk a little bit of weed and fucking
get baked and shit. That's what that's what community and friendships are all about. That's why I love it. So that's what you all should be doing out there. Discord's the best for that. So we got to do another Discord night too, Big Earl. It's been a minute.
We do soon.
Yeah. So everybody out there, man, we love you. Thanks for listening. Big Earl, you got anything else to say and tell the world?
Yeah, we talked about it a little bit, but CalMag, guys, grab some, get some, use some. Don't forget it.
Don't forget to mimic that fucking CalMag, everybody. Peace! Check out our cannabis lifestyle brand online at 8decades.com. Our custom smokes and accessories are perfect for your coffee table, bedroom nightstand, or kitchen counter. They're designed for you to show them off. The Canna community is also loving our hemp and cotton blend t-shirts, sweatshirts, scarves, and hats, finished off with our 8 Decades logo. We've got some awesome long-lasting goods that will be your favorite for years to come. 8 Decades, because a 9th decade of cannabis prohibition isn't acceptable.